Hey everyone, this is Matt. I'm just giving you a brief little introduction here for our rerun episode that we're doing. We decided that we would take the Christmas week off from recording so that we could have that time to spend with our families. So we are actually going to be rerunning a episode that we ran last year, our Gremlins episode. We hope you enjoy it, but we will be back again in 2 weeks with a brand new episode. Thanks everyone, and happy holidays. Now I have another reason to hate Christmas. This is the No Fear podcast. We know what scares you. I'm Matt.
I'm Mel.
And I'm Lisa.
And this is a No Fear Cast, the podcast where we dissect horror and all the things that scare us. This is episode 7 of season 5. It's Christmas, so we are watching Gremlins. We promise we will return to our Bly Manor watch after this episode, but we just couldn't help but indulge in a Gremlins rewatch. 'Tis the season, after all. All right, so I feel like maybe we should start out this episode by talking about our previous watches of Gremlins first before we get into information about it. Most everybody who's listening has probably watched Gremlins, or if not, the 1984 Gremlins, or if not, you will, or you probably wanted to. But yeah, as always, when we talk about TV shows or movies, or even books for that matter, we will use spoiling things. So if you haven't watched Gremlins or you want to rewatch it before you listen, just hit pause and go back. And as I mentioned in the intro, we will be returning to Bly Manor. We are going to watch all of that series, but we decided for Christmas week, for our Christmas week episode, that we would talk about Gremlins, which is something that we've been talking about doing for the past couple of years. So we're finally getting to that. Let me see. It's very hard for me to remember the first time I saw Gremlins. Let's see. Gremlins came out in 1984, and I think the first time I saw it, I was at my grandparents' house, and it was on TV. I did not go see it in the theater. I mean, in 1984, I think I was, 5? So I was not going to go to the theater for that. The first time I watched it, I was pretty young, though, because the evil Gremlins kind of scared me a little bit. And then when I was a bit older, but still a kid, I saw most, if not all of it, again on TV, and I enjoyed it. I really liked Gizmo in particular. And then I really didn't I mean, my only times watching Gremlins were basically when I was a kid. I might have watched it when I was a teenager, but this was my first time watching it as an adult. And since it'd been so long, there was stuff that I was like, oh, yeah, I remember seeing that before, that sort of kind of recognition thing where there were certain scenes like in the store, in the department store at the end, and well, in other scenes as well. The whole, like the story about the father and Santa Claus and all that, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So it was kind of like this weird, like, walk down memory lane as I'm like an adult watching this movie, knowing I've seen these scenes before, but it's just been so many years. So I enjoyed watching it. As I think I mentioned before on the podcast, I do like a good creature feature. And so this one was a pretty good creature feature. Plus it was funny as well. And then, of course, there were some of the actors I remembered from other things I watched when I was a kid, like around that time period too. So it was kind of a very nostalgic watch, I guess. So Lisa, Matt, what are your histories with this movie?
Well, I actually saw the Gremlins movies out of order. I may have seen Gremlins, the original one, when I was super young, but I highly doubt it. The first one I saw was Gremlins 2, the new batch, which came out in 1990. I was just the right age to badger my parents into taking me because of the Hulk Hogan cameo. And that was a big part of the reason why I wanted to see it, because I was all of like 8 or 9. So loved that movie. Don't really remember a whole lot about that one either, but then saw, like, we rented the original Gremlins probably not long after. And to be honest, there was not a lot that I had remembered because it's been a very long time since I've seen it again. I remembered like the Snow White and them loving Snow White and being in the theater. And that was really about all that I remembered. I remembered that and the mean old lady being shot up the powered staircase thing. I don't know what you call that thing. I remember that. but it was definitely rewatching it now as an adult. There was a lot that I had obviously forgotten, but man, I really did enjoy it. So I can't wait to dive into it once we've heard from Lisa.
Yeah, this I was trying to think. I was like you, I can't remember the first time I saw this movie. I was probably too young the first time I saw it. I don't think I saw the first one in the theater. I'm almost positive I saw the second one in the theater. But I may be wrong on that too, because I think I went to the theater a lot and saw movies that were maybe not age appropriate. So, but with Gremlins, yeah, I remember a lot of this movie, and it was a joy to rewatch it again, like to have a reason. Like, I don't know, I forget how much I love this movie until I watch it again. So yeah, there really wasn't any big surprises. I didn't remember. I guess in my memory, Corey Feldman had a bigger part in the movie. Like, I was surprised at how very little he was in this. Because in my mind, he was a bigger part. Of course, I remember the two like leads in this film, Billy and Kate. I remember Kate being super dark, and her, which I'm sure we'll talk about, her "Why I Hate Christmas" speech, which is like infamous, but also is one of maybe the best moments of cinema ever. I love it. It's just so it's just so dark, but it is a fun like creature feature, like Val was saying. One thing that surprised me, and I guess this is because I've been talking about this with several people now since it is Christmas. This isn't a ghost story, but this has a little bit of a framework narrative, which kind of fits with all the other Christmas like spooky stories. So I don't know if that was intended, but as a kid, obviously I didn't appreciate that. So that was kind of fun to notice this time around. But yeah, everything about this. There are so many iconic scenes and like iconic images. There's just so much, and it is just. I kept smiling the whole time I was watching this. So yeah, I have nothing but great memories. But then again, Spielberg and Joe Dante and Chris Columbus, like their films were such a big part of my childhood that I can't help but just be joyful watching this. So yeah, first impressions, I love it.
Well, before we dive in like hardcore, I just wanted to share two little bits of trivia that they're actually kind of related to one another. Do either of you know who the voice of Gizmo was?
Howie Mandel? Duh.
Bing, bing, yes. Okay.
I love this movie.
Okay. Now, here's the harder question. Do you know who was another famous actor who was a voice for some of the Mogwai and Gremlins?
Ew. Did the other ones have voices, really? Or did they just make noises?
Well, they did speak some.
I guess Stripe made some noises, didn't he?
He did, and they did talk some, like in the movie theater when they're talking about Milk Duds and Yum Yum and those sorts of things, and just the laughter, the crazy laughter. Okay, you probably will never guess it. It's Michael Winslow, the guy best known from Police Academy for being the sound effect guy who makes all the noises with his mouth.
Huh.
Well, that makes sense.
Doesn't it?
No, I would not have guessed it, but it would make sense.
That's why I did say another semi-famous actor.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So anyway, I wanted to share that. I figured one or both of you would have known about Howie Mandel. I don't know if our listeners did or not, but the Michael Winslow one, that one was a surprise to me when I looked at it on IMDb earlier today. So I just wanted to share that.
Oh, that's neat. Now I'm looking it up, and I'm noticing a few other names too. It looks like there are several like voice actors who did the voices. It looks like one guy who did Porky Pig's voice was also one. Oh, and the guy, Fred Newman, who was on the Mickey Mouse Club when it was on during the 90s. So for Disney nerds out there, that name might mean something. That's pretty cool. I'm glad you pointed us down that road.
Mel, I think you were about to say something before I jumped in there with that. So I want to make sure you have a chance to start us off proper.
Oh no, I think I was just about to say that I feel like I appreciate this movie a little bit more as an adult than I did as a kid, perhaps. So that was what I was thinking. Maybe like the humor, maybe in some spots.
I can definitely agree with you on that. I definitely feel like this is one of those movies where, like, watching it now, I'm shocked that it had a PG rating. This would easily have been PG-13 if it came out now. But like the fact that it was pretty much marketed as a kids movie, and Steven Spielberg was the executive producer, and like watching, I was like, wow, this is really dark for a kids movie. This is like, an 80s kids movie, because they had some darkness to them that you don't always see these days. Not saying that today's kids movies don't also have some darker moments. I'm thinking of some of the Toy Story movies and just Pixar movies in general. But yeah, like I was watching it now, I was like, wow, that's pretty dark. And adult me loved it though, so that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, you can just tell that there was such a joy for like this type of movie when they were making it, because the script, and this is things I didn't obviously appreciate when I was a child. I mean, I loved the way the Gremlins looked. I loved the way the Gremlins died. I loved the way just people died in this film. I will never ever get over the gremlin in the microwave. That will forever be my favorite kill, I think, on screen ever. I loved it as a kid. I love it now. It was just me watching it. But now looking at it and seeing it, like, there were so many fun throwbacks to just like, it feels like a movie lover's movie, because like Matt, you mentioned the Snow White movies scene where they're all like singing Hi Ho, which was really cute. But then like at the very beginning, when Billy is like running through town and he passes by the vet and he says, "Hi, Dr. Moreau." And then later when they do like a pan across the kind of small town, like downtown storefronts, they go over and it shows the veterinarian's door and it has Dr. Moreau written on it, which, just little things like that make me happy, because I thought there's no real need for that to be in the film, but it's fun. Or even like the fact that they kept having It's a Wonderful Life on television, and their town was like Kingston Falls. So it was like this almost perfect small town, but like not, it was like just off, which I kind of appreciated. Or like having Invasion of the Body Snatchers at one point on the television, right before we learn about the pupil stage coming out. That, just little touches like that are fun. And also how great, I don't think I appreciated, Matt, you mentioned this, so we might have to talk about her, but Mrs. Deagle, I don't think I appreciated as a kid about what a great character she was, because I was like you. I think I just remembered the fact that she died on that stair lift, which is another death that I love.
But she was practically a throwback to the Wicked Witch from Wizard of Oz.
Yes, I did not realize that. Like, I didn't.
Even down to the "I'll get your dog" kind of thing.
Yes.
Which again, with the dark humor, like, she doesn't just say "I'll get your dog." She says, "I'll put your dog in a dryer and turn it on high heat." Like, that's really messed up.
She said she wanted the dog to have a slow, painful death. So yeah, she was absolutely the witch from the Wizard of Oz, which was, again, that had to have been intentional the way, because you were right, they even crafted some of her speech that way. Even the fact that when the gremlins like attack her house and they're going to throw, she thinks it's carolers at the door, and she comes out with water and just full on throws water before she even like looks out the door. And you just think about just how mean of a person, it's like, it's not even just, she takes grouchy to another level. You know what I mean? Like just to hate humanity that much. It's pretty impressive.
She's also a really interesting Scrooge character, I thought, because she is evicting everybody at the beginning of the movie, and the house that she lives in. So it was a really interesting mixing of those two, like the Wicked Witch of the West, but also a Scrooge part, a Scrooge tangent, I guess, Scrooge aspect. I'm not sure how you'd word it.
A Scrooge who absolutely learns nothing through her ordeal. I mean, she's allowed to be nasty through the whole thing, and she's not gonna, I have a feeling even if she survived the chair incident, I don't think she'd be, going to anybody's house and saying, okay, I forgive your your rent this month. No, she was nasty to the core, and I kind of enjoyed that. She was a good villain.
She was. And like, I guess 80s trivia, she played Flo in Alice, which was, that was a sitcom that I watched a lot when I was a kid. So she was definitely yes. I quoted that a lot when I was a child, but she was kind of a mainstay, I guess, of 80s pop culture that people may not recognize now when they're watching Gremlins, but I would have.
Yeah, I think I had read something about her. It said after she was on Alice that she made a concerted effort not to be typecast. So I think she was going out and searching for roles that she thought she could like have fun with that wouldn't put her in that same role. So I don't know. I just imagine her getting the script for Gremlins and just really being excited to do this, which also makes me happy because it seems like a film that everybody had fun making. And I don't know if that was true or not, but it just like, I don't know, I just keep going back to like everything from like the script to the acting. Everybody feels like they are enjoying making this type of film. Like they know what they're making and they're fully enjoying it, which is another reason I love. Can I also ask too, since we're on the topic of the 80s, I had forgotten that. So the dad is, first of all, he's kind of the framework narrator because he starts off the story by being like, let me tell you this really ridiculous, like, let me tell you this thing that happened and you're not going to believe it, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway. And so he starts off by like telling this, and it was weird. I thought that the dad was the narrator because he is literally gone for the entire film. He's at this like inventors conference, and so it's mainly about his son fighting off the gremlins that have now invaded the town because the dad brought them in or whatever, and the dad comes in at the very last minute. But my question to y'all is, why in the 80s were we obsessed with characters that were like failed inventors with a heart of gold? Because there were a lot of them. And I mean, I'm thinking specifically of like Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. But that character, I mean, the family dynamics is pretty much the same. Like the men are always very sweet. They always are trying their best. they keep inventing things that are failing. Then their poor wives are like in the kitchens trying to use the inventions that their husbands make to make their life easier, but they're clearly making things harder. I don't know. It's just we did a lot with that trope in the 80s and early 90s.
Well, not just Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, but even Doc Brown from Back to the Future. I mean, he didn't have the wife that was Harry, but another failed inventor with a heart of gold.
Same character. We had the kid version in the Goonies.
Yes, the Goonies, and his dad too. They were both.
Yeah. I don't know. I just, it's funny because you see that and you think, oh, okay, I guess one of his inventions does kill his invention kills the first gremlin when the mom like blends it up in the blender and sends the green goo everywhere. But I don't know. It was one of those things that you're like, oh, okay, that's going to come back at some point. Like Dad's going to come in with an invention and save the day, but he really doesn't.
No, and you're right.
And I thought, yeah.
It even feels like a superfluous kind of point to the plot. Like, not to say that I don't like it being there. I have no problem with it, but it really doesn't do anything specific for the plot. I mean, he could have just been, a failed, mediocre businessman, a Willy Loman kind of character, a traveling salesman who's, not very good at it. John Candy a la Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. So I don't know why they put that in there. I like it. I mean, I like seeing his inventions and the inventions not working, but it didn't really strike me as one of those necessary plot points because it doesn't she could have just put the gremlin in a regular blender, not instead of a giant blender.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it was just and I mean, he made that point out, like he had the conversation with his son at one point when they realized that water will multiply them. He realizes that he says at one point, oh, this could be what does he call it? Like, this will be the thing that takes off. This will be the Peltzer pet or whatever, But at the same time, it was almost like I had the same thought as you. As I was like, oh, that was a detail that could have been taken out that I feel like would not have changed the story. And everything else was so tight in this story. If they introduce that Billy has a car that won't run, then later it's going to break down on them when they need it. The sword on the wall that kept falling. The dad does come in at one point and grabs the sword off the wall and is able to kill one of the gremlins that's attacking his wife in the great Christmas tree scene, which I love. That's another one I just love. But yeah, everything has everything, if it's introduced at some point, it's going to come back in the story in some shape. And it all ties very well together. Even the old man and his snow plow, where he has the realization that there really were gremlins in his machinery. But he realizes it at the last moment of his life, which is kind of one of those super dark comedy moments, but also tragic. But yeah, that was just one of those things that I noticed on this viewing where I was just like, I really think you could take out that detail and it wouldn't change the story. But like you, Matt, it doesn't bother me that it's there. I kind of enjoy it. I kind of like looking at I was looking at that little coffee maker his wife was struggling with and wondering if he invented the proto pod coffee machine, maybe that's what happened to him after that is he fixed that, because that's what it looked like in 84. It looked like this little single serve pod coffee machine. But I don't know, that was just something I noticed looking back on it now, that I was like, man, in the 80s we loved that. We really, really adored our inventors.
I want to take a quick detour back to something that you had said as well, because when we were talking about the the references to other movies and how this is kind of a movie maker's movie. There were scenes in the background when the dad is calling from his inventors convention that you may have noticed the robot from Lost in Space that was talking on the phone, but did either of you notice the time machine from H.G. Wells' Time Machine?
Yes.
And the fact that it clearly disappeared, went back in time. I had to pause the movie. I was laughing at it so hard.
This is what I mean, though. Like everything, it's hard to talk about this movie because I'm like, everything feels iconic to me and everything feels like joyous to watch, you know? Oh, man.
I was kind of torn about the father's character at that point. Like him being the inventor didn't really bother me in the beginning. I just thought it was must be part of the comic relief and it would give things to kill the gremlins with. I totally see what you're saying. That it kind of is a cliche, but I'm not sure why. But when he went to the convention, what was going on in the background there was awesome. And I was laughing at it. And of course, then, one of the articles that you pointed to, see, Lisa, talks about some of the cameos that went on during that scene as well. And it is kind of funny that he's just telling him about this boring conference he's at while they're like fighting these gremlin things. But that was the part where his invention shtick was kind of jarring to me because he doesn't fit in it. He goes to his inventors conference because he's an inventor. And then we realize that, all his inventions, not only do they not work, but they're not anything like the other inventions, like, the time machine and the robot. And he talks about how everything is way beyond him and he probably shouldn't have come because it's not helping him. So yeah, he's not just a failed inventor with a heart of gold, but he's also like out of his time. He's an anachronism. And that kind of threw me off because, yeah, I mean, everybody knows his voice just as a person in other movies from the 60s, 70s, and the early 80s. He's a great pick for narrator, but just his voice is kind of something out of like a noir as he narrates. The way he dresses is slightly off from, but you don't realize that till he gets out of the small town and goes to the big convention, that he's just not like anybody else. And even the things he makes are like throwbacks, because everybody else is like getting into, I guess, computers and technology. I mean, that's one of the things that was going on in the 80s is these the leaps in technology that we're talking about now were kind of starting to take off from work that had been done post World War II. So it was that kind of threw me off. I was like, if he's just an inventor whose inventions fail and he's a nice guy, good dad, whatever, protects Barney, that's good. I didn't want anything bad to happen to Barney. That's great. But when you went to the convention and you find out that he's like this, he's like out of time, like everybody else is doing stuff way more advanced than him. It made me wonder why they made that choice more than I had before, if that makes sense. Like that whole town just seems like it's a blast from the past when you see what's going on at the convention that he goes to. So I don't know if that's supposed to play up the isolation of the town, or like the nostalgia factor of the town, to do It's a Wonderful Life. But while the scene was fun, I was kind of like, okay, what's going on with the father and his 1950s inventions here? Yeah.
That is interesting. Well, I mean, I don't know if it was something we were supposed to feel maybe towards Billy a little bit, because you're right. The father does seem, if not anachronistic, then out of his league. When you have a time machine that is disappearing behind him and he is trying to sell the bathroom buddy that doesn't even work.
Precisely. Yeah.
And you're I mean, the whole time I was looking at that and I was like, why wouldn't you just carry a little kit bag with you? Like that big clunker brick of a thing is not easier. And it was sad, I think, especially when he was talking to his son about like what happened. He was like, what happens when you go to a meeting and you realize you haven't shaved and then you're out of luck? And I thought, well, not really. I mean, you just go into the meeting and you don't shave. But I wonder, because this was one of those things where, because with Billy, they had brought in sort of kind of a rival for him at the bank with the Judge Reinhold character. And I wondered, because I was surprised it wasn't fleshed out more. But I wondered if, like, because Billy's still, like, he works at the bank, but he's down on his luck. You know, he's still living with his parents. He has a car that doesn't work. And then he's got this dog that's just causing trouble for him all around. He's trying to sneak the dog into work, and then the old witch of the town wants to kill the dog. And then you have this character, Gerald, I think was his name, but he kind of plays his like slick, more successful rival, and he's kind of also interested in Kate, and so you have that like that rivalry with the love interest. And I don't know, part of me wondered if having the father, like seeing him in that, if we were not supposed to see like that's Billy's future if he doesn't change things. And then of course he does, because by the end of the story he's a hero, right? Like he saved his whole town and he's gotten a girl. And so I don't know if that was maybe like for me that seemed to be the function of the father storyline, is because we were seeing Billy being set up as like an underdog because his father is. Does that make sense?
No, that makes a lot of sense. I like that idea. I can totally see that. It's reminiscent to Back to the Future again, as you know, as Matt mentioned earlier, the Doc Brown type character. Except in Back to the Future, there was a rival for both the father and the son. But no, I could see that. This is slightly a tangent, but I just want to say I was totally confused by the ages of Billy and Kate in the movie. Every time I thought I understood how old, I'm like, are they 30 and living at home? Like, I seriously couldn't figure it out at all. It was very strange. Sometimes he acted like he was 17, and I guess he was going to high school. I don't know. But then he's in a bar and he has a bank job. I was totally confused.
Keep in mind, in the 80s, that in a lot of places it was still legal to drink 18 instead of 21. So that would explain the bar. I mean, I definitely got the impression after he talked with Judge Reinhold that, I mean, he was obviously younger than Gerald, who was, what did he say, he was 23. But yeah, like it was really hard to place. Was he like 18, freshly out of high school and like not going to college in order to help support his family? Or was he like early 20s, just out of college? I agree. It was kind of hard to figure out. And there were times where he even just looked like he was like 17, and then other times where he looked like he was like 20 something. Mm-hmm. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I thought this was one of those times that he could have easily have been they could have made the character deliberately a high schooler. But obviously they didn't. I'm kind of leaning towards he's probably, 18, 19, didn't go to college.
Well, I guess he would have to be. Yeah, he'd have to be close enough out of high school to still have like a non-weird relationship with his high school science teacher. So.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like if he's only been out of high school a year or two, then he could go back and. Like that would be his first thought, is I'm going to go back and talk to my high school science teacher. That whole, I cannot believe I blocked that whole like storyline out of my head. I don't know why. But I was like, oh, there's a high school teacher. It was, yeah. Okay. I feel like we need to talk about the actual gremlins themselves, because, and like the mayhem that causes, because this is really what the movie is about. And, I don't want to get too in depth talking about the other storylines when really it's just all about the gremlins. I'm sure like everybody else, I had a Gizmo doll. I wish I still owned the Gizmo doll, because I would love to have it. But I don't have it anymore. But yeah, they're just so cute. And how can you not love them?
Oh, I still want a Mogwai, like an actual Mogwai. I would take care of it. I would not get the sucker wet.
This was the other thing. So I remembered this. Okay, obviously everybody remembers the rules, right? No bright light. Sunlight can kill them. Don't get them wet, and never, ever, ever feed them after midnight. And number 3 is the most important rule. So that stuck with me from childhood. It also stuck with me that they got wet the first time because of the water that was in the like paintbrushes. They set Billy up to be like this artist, a good artist, because he's drawing and painting at one point, and the Corey Feldman's character accidentally knocks it over, and so I remembered that part. This was one of the parts that I did not remember, is that when he feeds them after midnight, I remember in my memory the clock had stopped. And so he didn't realize he was feeding them after midnight. I did not remember that the Mogwai themselves had like stopped the clock, had like gnawed their way through the wiring. And they're sneaky little things.
Yeah, I'd forgotten that too. And yes, they are sneaky little things.
Like, especially, Stripe, clearly he's the bad leader. He's got the mohawk. But I don't know. Should we talk? I don't know. Which one do you want to talk about first? I guess we talk about when they attack the mom, because that's the first real scene of mayhem that we get, is the mom in the kitchen.
Well, I forgot how quick and fast, like, she dispatches like 3 of them within 5 minutes. Like, it's pretty amazing. So, like blender, microwave, and then I don't remember how she killed the 3rd one, and then there was the 4th in the Christmas tree. That's right, she stabbed him.
She kills it with a knife. She has a knife in her hand, which she uses an incredibly large knife icing cookies. I just want to throw that out there.
Like, it was basically a butcher knife.
There. Yes, she is icing her gingerbread men, and she just has an impressive butcher knife out, just lying next to her, which she was using for some reason.
When she goes
I thought the same thing.
She takes 2 knives. She has a knife in each hand.
Yes, I did notice that.
Yeah, I was counting them because I was like, wait a minute, we're only like halfway. She just killed 3. And at that point, there were only, I think, 6 gremlins, because there were 5 at home, and then there was the one at the school. And I was just like, I couldn't, but I had forgotten about the YMCA pool scene, which was another wonderful scene. But yeah, she got rid of 3 of them right away. I kind of feel like if Mom had been in charge the entire time, the movie would have ended 30 minutes early.
Oh, absolutely. She took nothing from
because she actually kills 4 of them, because the 4th one is hiding in the tree, which, we just got done talking about our when nature attacks kind of eco-gothic, and I thought that was a perfect scene. We should have talked about that in the series, because it mimics, and this is again the tight writing of the script that I love. When Corey Feldman's character delivers the Christmas tree, he looks like he's wearing it because he's struggling to carry it through the door. And it mimicked almost perfectly the scene where the gremlin was inside the tree, but then the tree attacks the mom. It was just brilliant. But I also loved that scene too, because I thought, what a perfect way to make like a Christmas horror movie, by having a Christmas tree attack a mother right after she's finished creating cookies. Like, there couldn't. Oh, and at the same time, the music that was playing. Do you hear what I hear? It was perfect. So yeah, that was good. I also, Oh, I mentioned the YMCA pool because this is when, it really hits the fan, because Stripe goes into the pool and it gets all like super green and bubbly. Very much like if you've seen any sci-fi movie, nothing good is happening. There's lots of fog and smoke coming out. Of course, Gizmo and Billy escape at this point. Because they know what's happening, and Stripe spawns a whole army of them. Basically, this is when they go and get Miss Deagle. This is when the fun antics really start, I think, happening, because up until this point, they're just killing, right? Like they just are attacking and they're just killing things. But then when they get to Mrs. Deagle, they don't just kill her right away, but they dress up like carolers. And I really feel like we need to get into gremlin psychology here, because from this point on, it's insanity. Are they mimicking what they see in humans, or do they all just have their own little personalities and like things they want to do? Like, were they caroling because they had seen carolers earlier, or were they caroling because they genuinely enjoyed singing to this woman they were about to kill?
I think it's a little bit of both, personally. I think one of the things that they might be kind of getting at is how they do mimic, because there's always a movie on at the Peltzer household. Like you mentioned, It's a Wonderful Life and Invasion of the Body Snatchers and other things. And that's actually when Gizmo is driving the toy car around the department store at the end. You even have a flashback to dialogue from one of the movies that he was watching. And the Asian stereotype at the end who reclaims him, the old man, even says something like, "Oh, you let him watch TV?" And so, I mean, I wonder if that's kind of a jab at the idea that these, like the Mogwai, as they were still Mogwai before they became Gremlins, were a little bit influenced by pop culture. I mean, the Gremlins would always be chaotic and destructive, but some of their destruction seems like it came straight out of pop culture.
That makes a lot of sense. And before we get to the bar scene, because that's where I think we really start to see kind of what we're talking about, these like pop culture-y influenced gremlins, and really the super fun part of the movie, I think. Before we leave Mrs. Deagle, I just want to throw this out here because I caught this on this viewing and I don't think I picked up on it before. When the gremlins are attacking and she realizes they're after her and she goes and gets on the stair lift, she says, "They've come for me. I'm not ready yet. I'm not ready yet." Which makes me think that there is a subplot that we don't get to see where Mrs. Deagle made a pact with the devil to get all of her money and power.
Well, according to the director, the original rough cut was like 2 hours and 45 minutes. So, just saying, that could have been in the 40 plus minutes that were cut.
I mean, in my head, that's what happens, because the way she reacted to them, I mean, I understand being scared and wanting to run away, but like, you don't say, "They've come for me. I'm not ready yet." So like, she's expecting something horrific to come for her, which makes me think she's made a pact with the devil. I just want to throw, that out there, because now that's canon in my head. But we also have the gremlins attacking Santa right after that. And that's when the cops drive away. And then we have on the radio, we hear Rockin' Ricky talking about all the, quote, Orson Welles crap that he's hearing. Because that's, I guess, one of the funny jabs is that nobody believes this is happening. But let's talk about the bar scene, because there were so many good gremlins in this. And I know we're just getting ready, because at some point we're going to have to talk about Gremlins 2, and they really have fun with it in Gremlins 2. But let's talk about the gremlins in the bar. I have my favorite out of all of them. I'm curious, Matt and Mel, do you have your favorite gremlin in this scene?
I think I was just so shocked that they had found firearms somewhere that it was difficult for me to focus on what they were mimicking. Though the poker game cracked me up, like straight out of a mafia movie.
Yeah, I think the poker line too.
Well, I mean, there was a lot of them. Number one, I was getting tickled that Kate was just serving them. I guess she knew that that would keep them calm, because she just kept giving them beer and popcorn. And I was just like, oh, she's just like handling things so well. Anyway, so the ones that, I had noticed the ones playing poker, and there were ones playing video games too. There was the Flasher Gremlin. I don't know if you remember him. There was a Flashdance one who was in full leg warmers doing a dance, which I looked it up because I couldn't remember, but Flashdance came out a year before, so that would make sense. My favorite one was, it was like the one sitting to himself at the table. It was like he was in a noir movie in like a jazz club, and he had the hat and he had a cigarette, and he was just like very coolly smoking his cigarette and just watching all the mayhem around him. And I thought, I don't know what that gremlin story is, but I love him. And I'm guessing now that our theory is that they're just kind of absorbing everything around him, that he must have seen, a whole lot of these black and white noir movies.
Oh, he watched the Maltese Falcon for sure.
Totally. That's what I'm imagining. He was definitely like a Bogart gremlin. But then, and this is just where this movie tickles me to no end. Another gremlin comes up with two puppets on his hands. And just starts putting on this puppet show. And the camera just kind of takes it in for a minute, and then that whole scene is so chaotic, and it's supposed to be so chaotic. But at the same time, when you really stop and look at what's happening, it's just wonderful. And I can only imagine what it was like for the people not only just creating those puppets, but the ones who are coming up with the different ideas for it. Here are the video games gremlins, and here are the poker gremlins, and here's the Flashdance gremlins, and here's the drunk gremlin, and here's the noir gremlin. I loved it. I really, 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 truly love it. That scene was just, and nothing really violent happens in that scene. It's just, like you said, it's just pure chaos. And that's kind of what the gremlins are there to do. They're just there to produce chaos. And of course, right after this, Billy comes and gets Kate, and they run away. And she gives her speech, which I guess we're going to have to talk about at some point. So we might as well talk about her speech now. Okay, so this is, I feel like, what everybody remembers from Gremlins. Now, Kate had already shown us that she is super dark. Right before Billy asks her out, she says she hates the holidays, and she hates Christmas, and she gets mad when people say she has to like Christmas, because she's kind of like, why? If somebody says they don't like Thanksgiving, it's perfectly acceptable. She's getting kind of, as she says, grumpy about it. But she also says the line, and I forgot, and again, Matt, you reiterated this, that it was a children's movie, or at least marketed in some way towards children. I feel like it was more of a I don't know. Anyway, she says the line, while some people are opening presents, other people are opening their wrists. Which I was just like, oh, yeah, it is dark. She has got a very dark soul. And anyway, it mirrors her Christmas speech because she gives the famous speech to him about why she doesn't like Christmas. She finally like opens up like, this is why you want to know why I hate Christmas. This is why I hate Christmas. When I was 9 years old, it was Christmas Eve. I was decorating the tree with my mom and we were waiting for my dad to come home from work, except dad never comes home. Christmas Day comes and goes. Dad hasn't come home. We wait. 3 or 4 days later, we still don't know where dad is. It is very cold. It is snowing outside. So she, not her mom, she goes to light a fire in the fireplace and notices a horrendous stench coming from the fireplace. They call the fire department to pull out whatever dead animal is in there. They're thinking maybe it's a bird that got trapped, maybe a cat because it stinks really bad. But no, it's dad. Dad is in their chimney dressed in a Santa suit. He had wanted to come down on Christmas Eve with presents to surprise his family. And as it turns out, he slipped, fell, broke his neck, died instantly, and had been sitting there in their chimney for 4 days without them knowing. And then she says, that's how I found out there was no Santa Claus. Like, I probably could have repeated that entire speech to you from when I was a child. And it was just the speech from Gremlins. And I don't think I fully appreciated it until I was adult. And I was like, that is one of the darkest things I think has ever been written that I've ever heard. And yet it's been such a fun movie. Anyway, I don't know what your thoughts are on this speech, but I'd love to hear them.
It's the most gothic Christmas ever. I mean, like
Yes.
you would have an uncanny Santa. That's the way someone doesn't realize that Santa's not real.
And I will also, just from the script point of view, this scene is bookended with, first there's the scene of the like wonderful chaos in the bar, then she tells that horrible story, and then it goes straight to the movie theater where all the gremlins are inside singing Hi Ho while they're watching Snow White. So it's like, woohoo, fun and games, fun chaos, this is a blast. This is super dark. Woohoo, we're having fun again. It is just such a strange rhythm. I don't know why it works, but it does.
I don't know. Parts of Snow White are pretty dark and scary, as we've talked about before on this podcast. It almost makes sense that the Gremlins would gravitate toward that movie.
Yeah, Snow White is not that dark.
Oh, come on.
I don't know, Matt, what do you think?
So.
Yeah, I love the darkness, and I love the speech. And I know I said at the beginning of the episode about how this I was shocked that this movie was PG, but this was one of the examples that was used to create the PG-13 rating. So PG-13 didn't actually exist before Gremlins. So just more trivia to throw out there. And I dare say it was not just the violence, but probably just the overall tonal darkness that you've pointed out with the speech, because it kind of comes out of nowhere, where I mean, you have this love interest for Billy, who seems like, sweet all-American girl next door, who's talking about how people open up their wrists around Christmas time, and then tells this horrifically dark story about how her father died and she realized that there was no Santa at the exact same time. And I mean, that's just... it's crazy. And I love it. I mean, I'm kind of laughing here now thinking about it, because it's one of those things that your reaction is either to your jaw hits the floor or you laugh out of sheer awkwardness at the darkness. And I love the speech. It's so great.
It's an interesting way, I think. I mean, obviously, this is a comedy; it's a creature feature. I'm not saying it's like philosophy or something, but she is also kind of voicing the alternate interpretation of Christmas, which is, we're kind of um, we focus on the festive, happy, magical parts of Christmas every single year, but she is, I think, a voice for the darkness is there too, that we've talked about on this podcast before, just because of the time of year and the fact that there's ghost stories and horror around the time of Christmas. And I think in some ways while it is kind of, it's funny and it seems maybe overly disturbing in the type of movie that you're expecting to get, she's not wrong that people feel this way around Christmas time. She's not wrong about the pain of losing a loved one around Christmas time and that sort of thing. So I think it's an interesting way if you're starting on a movie with like It's a Wonderful Life, to have characters that to have all these different kind of representations of Christmas in one movie. I mean, even the Gremlins are just mimicking what they think they should be doing with the caroling. They end up attacking Santa. So the whole movie kind of has all these different pop culture layers to Christmas and how we celebrate or how we represent it. And maybe she's just kind of given a voice to and just another experience of Christmas that goes against the pop culture lens that she's being forced to look at it through. And now I don't want to make Gremlins seem like super serious. It's in some ways, but I thought that was interesting, putting both those interpretations of Christmas into one movie.
Yeah, I agree. I agree, and we get all the kind of unintentional creepiness of Christmas too, played out in this movie, because the climax of it after this takes place in a department store, specifically in the toy section of it, which I'm sure is like you could read if you wanted to go in depth as like a critique of like American consumerism. I don't think you need to. I think it's just fun to see Gizmo riding through in a toy car while another gremlin has a chainsaw. Again, it's a fun visual. It's just something fun to look at. But that kind of fits with the moral that we get at the very, very end when Matt, as you said, the stereotyped Asian man shows back up, which was another thing the 80s loved. But Spielberg, I did notice in this, kind of he always said that, or I had read an interview that said he believed a big blockbuster movie needed an explosion at the end. And, they certainly blew things up in this movie. So I was pleased to see that.
They blew up the movie theater, which is so meta.
It is.
With movies throughout the entire movie.
Wait until you see Gremlins 2, Mel.
Oh, yeah, I have to do that.
It gets more meta.
Well, yeah, because that would have worked had Stripe not been running across the street to the candy. Again, is that like need to consume, right? I do want to talk a little bit about Stripe's death when he finally does die. When Gizmo's, it's so sad. Gizmo hurts himself a little bit, but when Gizmo manages to open the roof for the light to come through, watching Stripe die in the sunlight, on one hand, you knew it had to happen because we needed an end to this movie, and he was the big bad, and he had to go. But the way they did it, like watching him, first kind of bleed out this like green and yellow goo, and then kind of melts away. But then he's finally this like weird gremlin skeleton laying there. I don't know. It reminded me of like the best vampire movies, when the big bad vampire finally sees the sun. It was, I thought that was a nicely done death scene. It was fitting for a villain, I thought.
Yeah, I agree.
No, and it went on an appropriately long amount of time too, so you weren't 100% sure if he was fully gone, which you always need to do. With
Right.
future. Yeah.
Well, we got to leave the room open for Gremlins too. And now apparently a Gremlins 3. So that might be on the horizon, I guess. There's been talk. But I'm sure now that we've watched this, we've got to watch Gremlins too. So I'm throwing that out there because I think Matt and I have both agreed we must make Mel watch it.
I'm shocked.
There's just no way around it.
Katie's childhood without seeing both Gremlins movies.
I know.
I saw the first one, but how you escaped the second one, I don't know.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I don't think I watched it. Maybe I'll start watching it and be reminded of having seen it at some point. But I do not. The pictures I've seen and reading articles for this episode of what you guys have told me about it, it sounds like I would like to go back in time and watch it. But I'm definitely
I don't
willing
think
to watch
you forget
now.
it.
It seems like
you forget Gremlins
I
too.
don't think I would forget Hulk Hogan appearing with Gremlins.
Well, that's just a brief cameo, but.
All right, well, that is solved. We're going to make Mel watch Gremlins 2. So be looking for that. We're going to continue our watch through of Bly Manor, but at some point we are going to we're going to make Mel watch Gremlins 2 because we'll revoke her 80s card if that does not happen. But, as always, we'd love to hear from you, our listeners. I'm sure you have had, fun listening to this. Hopefully y'all went back and rewatched Gremlins 2 while you were, or before you listened to this. If not, I suggest it. It's so much fun. But if you do reach out to us on social media, we'd love to hear what you think. We're at No Fear Cast on Twitter and Instagram. We also have a Facebook page. If you'd like to contact us by email, you can do that at nofearcast@gmail.com. If you love what we're doing, consider supporting us on Patreon. Over on Patreon, we give mini episodes on the weeks that these main episodes do not release. So it's extra content. It's kind of like just paying for some bonus content, but it also just really helps us because we could not do what we do without that. If that's not possible, we completely understand. Money is tight for everybody right now, but what you can do that's completely free to you is rate and review us on whatever podcast app you listen to us on. It is, again, free for you, but it does help other listeners find us. So even if you just do something short, that's fine. It does not have to be elaborate. Thanks for listening, and we will be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode.